Oh, there we go.
Awesome. Hey, friends. Good to see y'all.
Hello.
Hello,
Good to
happy
see everybody.
Friday.
Yes, you
Woohoo.
too.
Yes.
Can you believe it? Two books in a week, guys. Who are we?
Cheers.
Yeah.
I know.
I'm
I've
starting to
never
be
read
an
like
avid
this.
reader.
I know,
Right?
right? I mean, it's so good. My friends are like, why aren't you coming to lunch today? I'm like, I'm busy. I'm reading a book, you know. But they're
Love it. Yeah.
awesome, awesome
Yeah.
books for sure.
Gosh.
Um, I felt like this was another very emotional book, lots of roller coaster type emotions.
Yes.
Um, so I don't really know if I want to start with the Queen of Water or if I really want to jump into chapter 8. Um, I guess we should start with just this first question with chapter 8. I put, why does it seem that children nowadays seem to lose their childhood faster than back in the day? Um, thought that was
I,
such a big question. So you want to take that off, Tina?
yeah, since I'm the oldest, yeah. I think, back in the day, and of course I think the whole World Wide Web just brings everything to our fingertips in, very quickly. Social media is just outrageous right now. And back, when we used to have fun, the kids would all join up in the neighborhood and we would play outside all day. And then of course, when it was dinner time, we'd go in and eat dinner and then we'd be out again.
Mhm.
And like, it was just like fun kid play. Now, granted, we were mischievous and we did some stuff that we weren't supposed to, but it was just like it was the neighborhood cluster,
Mhm.
right? So it was just within our little group, um, and not so much, where your business can be everywhere now,
Yeah.
just because with a push of a button. So yeah, there's like we were around each other
Mhm.
and our families. So that's what we were exposed to.
Mhm.
And of course, now there are so many different avenues that, kids are watching movies that are inappropriate and, um, yeah, and they are, wise beyond their years, sadly,
For
Yeah.
sadly.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
And I
How about
find
you
it so
guys?
interesting, like all the kind of big tech gurus, like I've seen, like the kids of the CEO of, Google or, like all of the big tech companies very, like, very much limit their own children's screen time because of that. And so I had written down something similar for that question. It's just this unfiltered access
Hmm.
to a constant flow. And I mean, anybody can go on the internet and post whatever they want. So it's not even necessarily accurate information. It might be one thing if it's like, hey, at least it's, accurate that you're finding it, but there's so many things out there that are inaccurate that
Mhm,
it's unfiltered access to all this information. And if it's the first time you're reading it, it may not be true. And
mhm,
so then you've developed this idea that isn't even accurate.
mhm,
And then it takes a lot longer to get out of that.
mhm.
Mhm. For
I
sure.
even like with our own kids, um, like they never had TVs in their rooms.
Mm.
And there was a reason behind that because we did not want them staying up and watching, TV. They weren't allowed, they didn't get like, what do you call it? I think they got Game Boys, late and,
Mhm.
Xbox. I mean, we would not let them have that because of like some of the violence in the games and, you know, so we actually sheltered our kids from that,
Mhm.
knowing, or anticipating that, they might be viewing these things that we didn't want them to have anything to do with.
And I
Um,
actually don't think parents now really filter for
I
their
don't think
own
so either.
children,
Nope.
No.
and if it says, oh, it's kid friendly, oh, it's just PG,
Uh-huh.
there are underlined commentaries where you're like, ooh, they were actually trying to say yada yada, you know?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So if you're not willing to take the time and vet yourself for your own children, it can
Yep.
be risky. I mean, my girls love to get on our Alexa. She just heard me say that. Because we have it
Alexa
throughout
did.
the whole house. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we, listen to music and, activity, but on our one downstairs, it has a video on it. Well, they like to get on and they first start with Coco Melon. No, I'm on my meeting. She has to dress up because this is what we do when we first come home. You look beautiful.
Oh,
You look like
go
a
for it.
mermaid.
What's the outfit of
Love
tonight?
it.
We're a Little Mermaid. Yes.
Oh, love it.
Beautiful.
Yep. See? Oh, beautiful. I don't want. Okay, you look great. I did it. You're good. Close the door, please. So sorry.
Oh, no.
We're doing the best we can.
No, I love it.
But you have to filter. So they get on Coco Melon, but then it starts going, oh, well, if they scroll, oh, then it takes you to these families who have started doing something. And then before you know it, I'm like, wait a minute, they said, shut up. Whoa, what are you watching?
Uh-huh.
And then they start learning certain language and then certain behaviors, even though
Yeah.
these kids are playing with their parents. I'm sorry, but that's not the play type I would do with my children. So I'm like,
Mhm.
ooh, we need to start being better about, what we do allow them to have access to. I mean, my first graders, my boys especially, are
Oh.
very violent just in
Mhm.
their play. And they think, well, it's fine. We're just pretending to shoot each
Yeah.
other. Like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
You know what that really means. So then when I was reading The Queen of Water, I mean, oh, Virginia, she just was such an innocent child. And where I was so torn with her is when she finally is like, I need to call my sister. I need to be rescued. And she's going through, with, Carlitos or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
And he's being so nasty and
Ugh.
sneaky and manipulative.
Mhm.
And then when he starts to pretend to be nice again, am I making the right choice? Is this what I deserve? Or is this not what I deserve? And she goes, I'm so confused,
Mhm.
And so I think now with all the access we do give our kids, they never really know they're in the know. I actually think they're very confused children.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's no parental guidance anymore. And they don't even know how to ask, what clarification do I need? And I do feel, I love how you said, Tina, like the neighborhood kids played with the neighborhood kids.
Yeah.
We did the same thing. And we had 72 houses in my neighborhood growing up, and everybody, no matter your age, we played together. And it
Mhm.
was, you were told to go outside. And when I
Yep.
hear that whistle, you better get home in 5 minutes flat, there's no way I would let my kids do that now,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
there was a strange safeness that we all just expected. This is how it is.
Mhm.
And now times have changed,
Yeah.
Yes. Very much.
And I hate that, even with like bullying, I know this chapter brought up, that a lot, that I feel like, even back to the 90s, really, if you were being bullied at school, at least you could come home and it was kind of a safe spot. It's not like people would necessarily show up to your house, or like that wasn't a form of bullying. Whereas now you can't escape it. It's all online, it's everywhere, it's just permeating. So if you are having trouble with people at school, you can't escape it. I feel like, there's so much. And I don't know if that, kind of goes into it, but all of those things that the chapter mentioned, chapter 8, about, you know, prejudice and bullying,
Mhm.
you can't escape that, and
But then I think
it's-
about how kids are so confused by the terminology of
Yes.
prejudice and bullying.
yeah,
And now, and I put in here, the county is now making us all do the safety prevention now. This, when
Yeah.
I do this,
Yeah.
that means you're going to knock it off. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
that? Did I miss something?
You just haven't been talked about too yet. It was in our staff meeting a couple weeks ago that it's a new initiative for the whole county, that they realize that bullying is a really big deal in our county and we have to nip it in the booty.
No,
And there's curriculum that we are going to be required to teach by a certain date.
Okay.
I'll be
Yes.
interested to see. So we all have like a hand signal now, and we're
Oh, that
supposed
I
to be
didn't know
talking
about
about
hand
it. I
signals.
think it's a joke. I think it's
Uh-huh.
an
Yeah.
absolute and utter joke.
Yeah.
It's
Because
CYA.
it's just
Yes.
so silly. Yes.
It's to say that
So
there's something in place.
yes. And makes me think, well, where are we really having these biggest issues, right? And
Mhm.
what kind of bullying is it? Because I think it's more categorical than what it used to. It used to be like, oh, well, someone's picking on me and hurting my heart. Well, then
Yeah.
we got AIM, instant messenger. And that's where I officially, I mean, third grade, I was called brace face for having braces,
Mm.
but that was one type of bullying. But then I was being cyber bullied when I was in high school. And I got nasty because people would create, fake names and
Uh-huh.
pretend to be certain
Easy to
people.
do.
And it's amazing to see how it's changed.
Hmm.
Well, now you got Snapchat and it only lasts so long and it can be gone
Mhm.
in an instant flat, you know. In the text messaging on there too, it's there for a second and then it's taken away. So the bullying is just, it's hit a whole new level,
Yep.
Mhm.
but there's still bullying in your younger age group. So
Mhm.
where I was concerned is when they were talking about in the chapter, they were talking about Cinderella, Hansel and Gretel, all these old fashioned, fairy tales are actually very, very dark stories of
Mhm.
Mhm.
child labor and abuse of a variety of different levels, but they've been tweaked for protection purposes. So the
Mhm.
kids really don't know the full details that this story entails. So my thought was, how do we actually find full backgrounds on our kids? Because a lot of families hide a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of
You wouldn't
information.
tell.
So what do you put in place to make people feel comfortable to
Mhm.
share? And then do you send out like a message through the counselors? And then at the bottom, check, I would like for my child's teacher to be aware. Like where do you start? And then should there be textbooks based off certain categories for all age groups, not textbooks, but just children's literature to
Yeah.
access that would be considered vetted? Because I have so many kids in my room this year that have such messed up families.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
never had this many. And I mean messed up stuff, not just going through like a really hard divorce where parents can't get along, like
Yeah.
twisted
Yeah.
things. And these kids are begging for attention and they don't know why.
Mhm.
But I know background because people have heard things,
Yeah.
through a
Mhm.
grapevine. So how can I make a choice to help a kid? They won't open up to the counselor, but they will tell
Mhm.
me a little bit. And it's like, how do you
Mhm.
help them without getting yourself in trouble?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I don't know what the right things to do.
Mhm. And that, yeah, that's such a hard one because it's, really even now, there's nothing that's necessarily age appropriate anymore. I mean, like, I guess you can go with the majority because, for example, I would never bring up like unwanted pregnancy in my fifth grade classroom.
Yeah.
However, unfortunately, in some communities and in some places, like fifth graders are dealing with that. And that is such like this, and definitely not in my, like I would never bring that up to mine, but it's just almost one of those like, yeah, how do you deal with that? Or, does it depend on your community? Like I say, there are several places where, most families are broken up, or, most, people have a single parent household or are being raised by, aunt, family, friend, grandparent,
Mhm.
anybody else.
Mhm.
And it's just and if our county wasn't so, hell bent on everything must be vetted all the time for CYA, it's, I love bringing that stuff up through literature and talking through, um, really just modeling thinking aloud. And, think
Yes.
alouds are great, not just for, like a strategy for reading, for
Mhm.
context clues. But I've found like when I'm reading something that's debatable,
Mhm.
like I like to say, well, I'm a little torn because one part of me thinks you know, this. But then another part of me thinks that, and there, you know, and modeling how to, I guess, think through something rationally and think through, you know, like if somebody's, you know, a protagonist was abandoned or something, or, you know, their father left them, you know, being able to, you know, use that and think through, well, you know, I feel bad for the mom here because, you know, of this, but then she also made this decision that ended up hurting the child, but I can understand why she's really stressed out, you know, and really modeling kind of what that is. But now I'm so nervous to bring up anything that doesn't involve a two-parent household, you know, in a
Mhm.
heterosexual family with, you
Right.
know, your 2.5 kids and the white picket fence and a dog, you know.
Mhm. And that's not normal now.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
Exactly.
Not normal.
Exactly.
So you can't say normal because what is considered a
Yeah.
norm,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, this book, I just felt, I loved Virginia's character and knowing she was a, you know, a real person. Um, the fact that she was taken at such a young child, a true child who to her had freedom. She was allowed to go outside, she was allowed to explore. She still was dealing with child labor, but she felt like she experienced the concept of being a child. She loved her goat, you know. There was a sense of freedom. And then
Yep.
coming home that one day and being told, like, no, what did they say? We'll take her. And she
Uh-huh.
was
Uh-huh.
like, what do you mean you'll take her? Right. And she was trying to she I just love my children. Um, she was in shock. Like, what do you mean? And
Uh-huh.
realizing like this is my last night at home. Will I ever see them again? Oh, they're supposed to bring me home once a month. Okay, I guess this is normal, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then she starts experiencing, you know, trauma with these new people who seemed like the new dad, like
Mm.
loved her, you know, it's calling her her daughter, his daughter. And she was like, oh, he made me feel good. He seemed appreciative, but the mom was just crazy. Like, oh, I couldn't stand her. So as Virginia gets older, I started thinking, wait a minute. Virginia was a child of trauma, you know, but
Yeah.
she didn't realize it for the longest time. She had an abusive father. When he would drink, he would become even more abusive. She witnessed herself being abused, witnessed her mother being abused, you know, and not just verbally, like physically being beaten. Um,
Scars.
and
Yeah.
so I'm like, okay, do you think Virginia was a child of trauma? Yes, and trauma makes you do weird things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was amazed at how she tried to survive through her imagination. I love when she talks about MacGyver. You know,
Yeah.
she just fell in love.
Yes.
Oh, I'm going to be
And the
his,
soap
you know,
opera.
senorita.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
you know, tell me what to do, MacGyver. We'll do this together. And I just loved that. But the day that all of a sudden she was like, well, forget it. No more MacGyver.
Uh-huh.
That to me, I was destroyed because officially she's allowed the trauma to create just pure darkness for her. This
Yeah.
is what I deserve. This is how it's always going to be. And you just see this constant battle with herself, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, it was just heartbreaking to me because she talks about on page 73 and 74, it said Virginia wonders what it would be like life to be like the little girl. Let's see, she says, would be life to talk to a little girl just like herself. And she said,
Mhm.
I have such an empty space inside. It is like the open beak of a baby bird squawking to its mother,
Mhm.
feed me, love me, a gaping, hungry, dark space. And
Mhm.
that was the first time that I felt like I witnessed her pure heart. Like she
Yeah.
was purely broken and she
Mhm.
was so not deserving of any of that. She was a great kid. She worked
Yeah.
hard. She was a little bit of a master manipulator, but still
Yeah.
did what she was supposed to
Oh
do
yeah, the
the
robbery
Virginia
thing. Yeah.
way. Yeah. Um,
I like
how she
on page
describes her feelings.
20, and this just it started with her personality.
Yeah.
She's like, then I bounce harder and higher until I get giggly. and breathless.
But she was
As
told
soon as,
not to be on the
as soon as
couch.
they left, she
Yes.
starts breaking all the rules. And I was like,
And yeah,
go, yeah.
I loved it. And it's almost like I feel like to be in a position like that and to be able to escape from it, because it's so natural to her. I mean, like she was taken so young
Mm-hmm.
that it like, literally like I couldn't imagine that being now, somebody coming and telling me, now like, oh, go to this. Like that's unfathomable. But if somebody had told me that when I was 4, 5, 6, it probably would have been like, okay, like you must know better. This is just kind of the way of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you just kind of accept it as fact. And then, but I loved like with that personality of her, just kind of like the I bite my thumb at you, type thing, to get out of that trauma, even when it's so natural, is to be spiteful. Like I loved her, first thing of like when she escaped, she knew that they were going to come back and apologize to her. And she was like, and one day, like, and that was kind of her motivation for the longest time,
Mm-hmm.
until she found some other things. But it was through, this spite of you're not going to be like this. And maybe I'm not strong enough now, but one day you're going to come back and have to apologize to me.
Mhm.
And I think that spite carried her through at first when some of the ideals left and she no longer had this fairy tale, oh, everything can magically be okay. But through that spite and anger, I think that was her kind of ticket to say, all right, this is what's going to motivate me now until there's something more to grasp onto,
Mhm.
Watch me.
I know she talked about the TV show that she loved in a
Uh-huh.
weird way, the slave show. And it caused her to really consider the concept, am I a slave? Well, yeah, you absolutely
Yep.
were. You
Yep.
were forced to work for no pay. You're locked in the house. You're not allowed to leave. They are fully in control to the point that when you were allowed to leave, you still felt like they were watching you.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
What are they going to do to me? Are they going to beat me? Will I end up in the cemetery? And when she talks about, oh, how did she word it? Oh, drats. She's talking about how she wants to leave. Mommy. And oh, I love you. You need to go downstairs, Boo Bear. What? I lost the lipstick. Okay, well, we'll look for your lipstick later. You need to leave the room. Thank you. So sweet.
I love it. I've never had to deal with that.
Boy, Mom.
I've got a princess too. I've got a princess.
Their fingers are underneath the, door, yelling, I'm going to the bathroom. Yeah,
That's so
we're
funny.
doing good. But they're talking about when MacGyver says, what does he say? You're free now. And all the slaves just stare, like, what do you mean I'm
Mhm.
free now? And no one
Yeah.
feels free. And she goes, I
Mhm.
wonder if I would run for my life and be like, yes, or would I stop and stare? And she goes, no, I start my race now.
Mhm.
And it's like, wow, I can't imagine. Like, are
Mhm.
you that manipulated into thinking that even when you're free, they can still get me?
Mhm.
Knowing she was basically captured for 8 years, they
Yeah.
manipulated the family into thinking she wanted nothing to do with them. It's just heartbreaking to me. And no,
Yeah.
this really still is happening in the world.
Oh, yeah.
It's disgusting.
Uh-huh.
Um, like, how do you overcome something like this? I know we were showing pictures to my students of kids, child labor, who used to, just working back in like Theodore
Mhm.
Roosevelt days and whatnot of Georgia Studies Weekly. You have all
Mhm.
these kids in these sweatshops who are, helping make yarn and taking the string and wrapping it up.
Tomorrow,
And I'm trying to
20
explain.
showers with a high of 68 degrees Fahrenheit and a low
Do you
of
need to know the
58
weather for
degrees.
tomorrow? This is so entertaining. And they were like, wait a minute, they look like they're my age. And I go, they are. And they were dumbfounded,
Mhm.
and I go, yeah, things used to be very different, even in
Mhm.
America. Like things change. And that's coming from my first graders. So it's
Mhm.
impressive when they finally, I wasn't teaching about it. They saw something and the questions started. So when you were talking about, Kim, it's important to use literature models as think alouds. It's not I'm forcing a conversation. I'm
Mhm.
trying to model my thoughts and hope they somehow either connect or develop their own
Right.
opinions and
Yeah.
thoughts.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's something I've noticed has become a very weak skill with my
Mhm.
students because I don't think there's a lot of interaction and communication with families anymore. They don't even
Yeah.
sit in a restaurant and talk to each
Yeah.
other. The parents are on the phones, the kids are on tablets, they have headphones on. Like,
Yeah.
why are you even out at a restaurant? I don't get it.
Mhm.
They don't know how to talk, or they immediately respond. This is my favorite at school. Well, I don't get it. Well, I gave directions. Good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they've learned the habit of saying, well, I don't get it, because they just want the parents to go ahead and do it for them.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Teaching independent thinking is
Mhm.
like a lost art. You know?
Yeah.
Oh. I
Very
know
true.
one thing that I was curious because of our different age groups. I said, what are two books that immediately came to your mind when you think of your age group that would help teach the concept of acceptance and prejudice? And one that they talked about in chapter 8 was The Name Jar, which is a book we do use
Yeah.
at the beginning of every year, where your name sounds different. Sometimes kids laugh and giggle, oh, that's such a strange name, but teaching the concept of, culture, where you come
Mhm.
from. There are different names out there, and teaching acceptance. Did you guys think of books right off the top of your head that you've used in your own classrooms?
We've actually currently, or we just finished Tacky the Penguin, and he's just, he just does his own thing, but he's turns out that, in that particular story, like he saved the day,
Mhm.
and saved all of them because of him being different from the group.
Yeah.
And he was different in a very smart way. But I like that.
He beats to his own drum.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
That
And
is
for
a good
mine, it's more like I try and do more like socioeconomically because it is a pretty diverse group. So, my students are pretty used to having, students with diverse names, and that's, something, they're very used to that. Like I've never really seen, from a name because it's, fairly diverse, but socioeconomically, there is definitely the stigma you see, oh, you don't have a Stanley, or you don't have,
That's
this, that, or the other. And it just becomes this keeping up with the Joneses, but for 11-year-olds,
ugh.
which is hard to see because it's like, oh, you don't fit in because you don't have Lululemon, you don't have a Stanley, you don't have, all of these things.
What's a Stanley?
Of the Stanley cups, like the SNL skit. Did you see like the big dumb cups or whatever? They had a skit, but they are the
So good.
everybody's carrying them around, big handles, gigantic. Apparently they've been around for forever, but now they just had this resurgence that's the newest thing, like you have to have the
That's what
Stanley,
everyone asked for Christmas.
especially if you are a fifth grade girl,
A
you
Stanley.
have to have a Stanley cup.
Oh,
And
I
Lululemon
know what a
leggings
Stanley
and
Cup
all
is.
of
I've
that,
never.
We're
right?
gonna have to get you one, Tina.
Yes, yes. And that's just the thing. So I see more of my students like with that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I like to bring up, if I can, books where people don't have as much money, or, cases where, like in the book Outcast United, somebody who's a refugee, and it's, easy to, their parents are at home, I'm sure saying their own thoughts about, refugees and things like that. But just bringing up books where, you can look at somebody from a different socioeconomic status
Mhm.
and understand where they're coming from. And it's no longer, with the hope of that for them to not be like, oh, you don't have a Stanley because of, whatever.
Or
But
it doesn't
just
look like a
putting it out.
Stanley.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And just, those. So I use House Arrest is a good one. It's a book. It's written in verse. So it's a pretty, easy read, but it's for fifth, sixth graders about a kid who is on house arrest at 12 because his father left the family his brother who's very sick, and it goes along with like a physical disability too. His brother has a trach in his neck and is very sickly all the time. So he steals somebody's credit card to pay for the medicine. And the mom can be sometimes borderline abusive because of the stress. So it's very good at looking at traumatic family situations. And I mean, just kind of, when everything is beating on you all at once, or like how one decision leads to another and like the snowball effect. And it's a really good book that kind of points out, the bad kid, look at what's actually going on at home with him. Like, and it really helps them to see the areas of gray, that issues are not just black and white, that there aren't always happy endings and there aren't always the right decisions to make. And sometimes you just have to make a decision. And that's, one that I use.
It's interesting when you were talking about the traumatic family situations and the mom couldn't cope appropriately and her anger ends up taking out, which makes me think of Virginia and her mom, because her mom did love her. She said crazy stuff because I didn't realize how young her mom was. When you get into the end of the book, it says, well, she was our age when she started having her babies, and they, were not, born, or they were born and they, had health issues. And she couldn't cope because she loved them and she was a child herself, and it does make you think when one thing happens in a family, it does affect everybody else in that realm. One book that we've been doing acceptance this whole week, and one book I found was a new one I used, and it's called Yoko, and it's about a little kitty cat who loves sushi. And she brings sushi for lunch, and all the kids are like, ew, is that raw fish? Oh, I bet it's still wiggling. And they start making her feel so bad for something she absolutely loves. And the teacher tried to play like the happy be kind song and all these different things, and she realizes they're still treating her horribly. So she sends a message on Monday, we're going to have diverse family day, bring something of your culture to share. And even that day, everyone's supposed to try something from everyone's culture, but they still refuse to try Yoko sushi. But one little boy, who I can't remember if he was a rabbit or he was a raccoon, he was like, oh, I'm still so hungry. I think I'll try this. And he loved it. So the next day at lunch, he brings something that she tried that she liked, and she brought more sushi, and they decided to have a restaurant for lunch. And it just showed it could be that one person to turn it around. For one kid, and then we talked about the dominoes effect. When one person does something nice, it makes that person feel so good, they want to trickle down, which is a very simple concept, but you think about young kids. And so I've been fascinated reading all these novels, because this is not stuff I would be reading with my students. But it's bringing up topics that you're like, wait a minute, like my one little boy, I had a boy leave today. I'll never see him again. And is a heartbreaking situation. Sister horribly abused for years and no one knew. And she was abusing my student. No one knew. And this all came out when he was 4. And now he's in first grade, and sister will never be allowed to be around him again, and is now in a psych ward and will be there for the rest of her life. And the mom is in and out of the picture because she can't cope. And so she's taken drinking, and she's in and out of rehab. And he's hopping from different families to who can put up with him for this period of time, because he's very hard. But he's a child who is downright confused. He is a trauma child, but no one has the money to get him therapy. And it's not like our counselor can meet with him on a daily basis, maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks. He's not getting the emotional support that he needs. And I think about Virginia, she never had emotional support. So how the heck did her imagination, I mean, she handled some things beautifully, I
Mhm.
would never have,
No,
my
no.
escape would have been dark. And you watch how she changes as she gets older, and thank God she learned how to read, because I started thinking
Mhm.
about Audra from
Yeah.
my first
Yeah,
book.
yeah.
The passion, like, no, I have to read now. It just hit her one day, like, no, I have to educate myself. I have
Yeah.
to learn. I have to do this. And that became part of her healing process. She learned
Mhm.
to write. She could write her feelings. She created her poetry. Because if you keep putting it in and putting it in and never releasing it, what usually ends up happening? An explosion of some sort,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Um,
She had said, this is like way early in the book. She said, "No, my word is silent, but it thunders inside of me.
mm,
My
Mhm.
word gives me power. She might beat my body down, but my spirit will stand tall.
ooh,
I shut my eyes and make myself a promise. I will defy Doctorita every day, every chance I get, in my own secret vivissima way."
I love it.
I love
And
that.
I mean, she was just like fiery. I love
Yes.
that part of that character.
Yes.
And
But,
it
and
made me think back to what book did I do for my picture study? Oh yeah, same one. Audra. Back to Audra.
Mhm.
You think about fire, the concept of fire.
Mhm.
Like they burned all these books, right? Well, I loved doing our project of the book, well, the one pager
Yeah.
you were
Yeah. Yeah.
supposed to do. So she said in there, can you pick, words that stood out to you? Or like, what was your main idea? Those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And a word that I picked was ablaze. And I
Ooh.
put it in my own words, was burning uncontrollably, but it could be emotion, not just fire. And so
Mhm.
when I thought about, I'm reading this book at the same time I'm doing that, and I connected so much those two stories together of these girls that they were fire. Fire doesn't have to be looked at as this destroyer. It could
Yeah.
be a survival skill for some.
Mhm.
I love when you read Spirit Stands Tall. I mean, she
Yeah.
was so young, yet had such an intense grown up side to herself.
Yep.
Mhm.
Because
Yep.
really, who was raising herself all of the years before she was ever even sold?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Herself,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is so crazy to think
Just
about.
had that spark.
And it's
Mhm.
that method of escapism too, that I see in why she loved MacGyver, why she loved the soap opera, why she ended up loving books. And there was some project we had done, I think, for the very first class with Dr. Allen, where you had to look up the articles and find something and write up on them. And it kind of brought me back to one that I had done there, where a lot of very avid, voracious readers love to do it in part, it's theorized because it allows, especially those who are in like the preteen, teenage, like on the verge of discovering who they are, will use books. And for Virginia, it was TV at first, but we'll use books to kind of test out different realities. And so, like, you can, if you are somebody who is in a traumatic situation, like you've been abandoned, let's say, by your parents, and if you are reading other books where you can kind of put yourself in place of the narrator, you can see how that person acts and determine if that's what you want to do. So, kind of bringing back to like, especially for these traumatic situations, bringing books like this up would be fantastic because it lets kids who are also going through something like that figure out how they want to cope. And it's a
Mhm.
great way to say, oh, I really like how she did this. I don't really like how she did that. Or, oh, when she did this, it paid off for her. So she got something really good when she did this. But when she reacted this way, it kind of backfired on her.
Mhm.
And so I think for Virginia, and sounds like for the real life, person too, she was using her forms of escapism, via TV and then books to help raise herself. So she was literally using MacGyver to help raise her because she would watch what he did and then say, how could I, apply that?
Mhm.
She always had a plan, just like Mia.
Yeah.
Like she was
Yes.
always concocting plans.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I've made that connection. When you mentioned the MacGyver and you like this, he said to the slaves, you're free.
Mhm.
And they just stood there standing,
Yeah.
and staring. I put a post-it on this because it said, I understand why fear feels familiar
Mhm.
and freedom feels terrifying.
Yes.
And I was just like, wow,
What page was that on? Do you remember?
that's 121.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, she's stuck.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
She's stuck and she knows she's in a bad situation, but it's almost like she was brainwashed to think these things.
Yeah.
And she goes on with her life,
Yeah.
over the years. And it's kind of like she accepts it,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but she also like she escapes through, different things. Yeah.
Well, the eating disorder that
Yep.
she creates for herself
Yep.
killed me.
Yeah.
Because it was a form of manipulation in a sense, Well, if I do this, does it help me do this? And it was so twisted.
Mhm.
And I thought it was ironic too when you look at Dr. Rita, who obviously was very overweight and didn't really take care of herself. So no, I have to be thin. I have to do this. And then she starts really destroying her body. But then you're thinking about the people she lived with. If they wanted to keep her around, how did they not notice that
Mhm.
she was?
Yes.
Because usually your skin color will drastically change. The gauntness would have been there. Paying attention to her showed they never really paid attention to her because they should have seen that she wasn't eating,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and so when she's trying to figure out, well, am I a part of the family? No, you weren't a part of the family. You were in none of the pictures. It
Mhm.
was all manipulation on their side.
Yes.
So no wonder the poor thing was just constantly confused. She had nowhere to belong. Um, and
It
then I
was
thought
very
was
like,
amazing the Bible when she gets back to
yes.
the house, and how in the world did she pick up the Bible and have that access to her sister's number and never didn't
Wow.
call her for years? You know, is
Mhm.
just mind blowing to me. Another form of manipulation.
Yeah.
It's like what they do when you're tortured. They capture you and they torture you into thinking all these things, and then you believe it.
Mhm.
Oh, it's just crazy to me.
It was very Stockholm syndrome
Oh yeah.
to me, like that's all this guilt she felt because they made her feel that, she's growing up and it's very much like they would tell her just enough and like give her just enough like attention and love every now and then, but like they would make her feel needed just enough when she was about at her breaking point to make her think, oh, well, they do need me, they do care about me, they do.
Oh,
It's
make
not
it
that
an
bad.
origami.
Yeah.
I'll make you a penguin.
Yeah.
Thank you for the paper. That's how I felt.
Right.
Like shame
Exactly.
on you.
Yes, and they would tell her just those things, or like give her just the amount of freedom. Like at that party they went to, and the Dr. Rita was like, "Oh, go dance with the boy," and things like that. So it was just enough to keep somebody who's been traumatized by you for that long, and that's how they were able to manipulate. It was just enough to keep her like the little dangling a treat in front of her face
Mhm.
and then moving it and moving
Yeah,
it.
they treat her like a dog.
Yeah.
Like, oh, here's your spot on the rug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shame. Shame. And how can they live with themselves?
Right.
That's another thing I thought a lot about. Like, I could never be like that, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I think they were clearly miserable people.
They
I
had to
mean,
have been.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, they didn't like their marriage was just
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a good marriage.
And she
I don't think
created their
either.
special dinner.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
I love you. You're so kind.
Say what? What?
When she did the special dinner, she was
Oh,
years ago. I thought
oh
they were going
yeah.
to get divorced. So I created them a candlelight dinner and
Yes.
I
Yes.
sat them down and said, you need to make up because the boys and I need you.
Uh-huh.
Huh?
Like, whoa, she felt for them.
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
weird odd moments. I thought it was interesting. Like she would use the hair gel from Dr. Rita or use makeup. And yes, a
Lip
lot in
gloss.
Yeah.
secret, but they did give her access to some things.
Mhm.
So there was a concept of like, oh, I am free to roam the house. I am free to use the hair gel. Or
Mhm.
I love Virginia's own manipulation of, well, no, I'm not going to wear that. And she goes, well, I'm going
Yeah.
to keep saying it. And one day she's going to bring me what I want. And she
Yep.
did,
Yes, and she
like
did.
she sticks to her guns. The power that I wonder if she could have ever looked back and be like, I did have power. Because I know a lot of times when you do experience true trauma, people that deal with trauma experience extreme guilt for years to come if they don't get the right kind
Yeah.
of therapy. Did she ever realize, like, no, I was not in the wrong? No, I was good. No, I had to do this to survive. And it doesn't make me a bad person. Like, did she? I just can't imagine her
Yeah.
psyche
Yeah.
because I mean, gosh, it just was such an intense read. And how they describe her, she had to be drop dead gorgeous.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes.
I mean, everyone in town, and they loved her personality. Like the people
Uh-huh.
who weren't jerks were
Yes.
amazed, but you don't realize she's such a wonderful asset to you. She's so beautiful. She has such beautiful poise. Like, what?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, 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 like, stop shutting it down.
Mhm.
Were they fearful that someone would take her? Is that why they were so, no, we don't want anyone to think she's a good asset? Because then would
Mhm.
they fight us for her? Would they ask to pay more for her?
Yeah.
Or
Mhm.
would they see through us? Like, how did people not see through them
Yes.
for the longest time? I was heartbroken over her first love.
I
Yes.
know.
I know. Yes, me too.
Her little butterflies and her
Antonio,
stomach
yeah.
when he kissed her. Oh, me and more, just
Yes.
run away together. And I
And
thought
he
she
was such a
was.
good guy. And, because I was kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm like, everybody else in her life has been crappy.
Yes.
Like I'm just waiting for him to, and like that's a cynical, way to look at it. But I'm like, but everybody else in her life. So I'm just like, is that the way the story is going to go where, oh, something's going to happen? And he just really was a genuinely just nice,
Yes.
nice guy. And I think all those experiences taught her that. And that was one of the questions that you had written that kind of stood out to me was like, how did she become the queen of water? How did she develop this dual personality? And it's one of those weird things, like it is awful that she had to go through what she did, but I don't think if she hadn't gone through that, if she had not experienced that, she would not have developed this dual nature and ultimately come to the conclusion that she can be both.
Mhm.
And there was
Love
this
that you said
line,
that.
I had the Kindle version, so it was the page numbers wouldn't be, but it was like literally the second to last page. And when she acknowledges, she says, now I see that sometimes the person you thought was your enemy was really your teacher, or even in an odd way, your savior. I see that wishes come true in roundabout ways. I see that if you try to fit someone into a box, she might slip through the seams like water and become her own river. And just that acknowledgement, especially that line with somebody who you thought was your enemy was really your teacher. I wonder, is she referring to Dr. Rita? Is she referring to, the people who, yeah, she definitely saw as enemies, but did that ultimately teach her to be the way that she is?
I mean, Carlos taught her to
Yeah.
read.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, which is shocking because if he wanted to
Mhm.
keep her for himself, I was very surprised that he wanted
Yes.
to educate her where you could develop your own mindset.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
When you talk about Queen of Water, she talks close to the end when she goes back to her family and she's fearful to drink the water her mom gave her because now she's so knowledgeable. She knows about microscopes and the bacteria that's in there. And like, this is
Mhm.
why my cousins and my siblings have the pot bellies because they do have an amoeba,
Yeah.
from
Mhm.
bacteria. And she's trying to realize, like, oh my God, I came from this. And
Mhm.
now
Mhm.
I'm in shock coming back to it. Who am
Mhm.
I? And so
Yeah.
when you said, it's dual nature, it's okay to be part of both worlds and
Yeah.
create you. And it doesn't mean you have to ostracize yourself from one or the other. You can still
Mhm.
be a part. It's just going to be a little bit different. You do
Yeah.
think about all the people she learned from, because she did have great people in her life. Like I
Yeah.
loved the lady at the market from the first, was it the first
Uh-huh.
or the second town when they moved to the
Yeah.
second apartment? And she had the two little girls who were about the same age. She's like, oh, I wish you would play with them. They would just adore you. I just
Yeah.
love being around you, Virginia.
Yeah.
She learned from her. And even the neighbor, when,
Yeah.
Carlos was, attacking her, um, they seemed like such a wonderful family. And we got you. We got you. It's going to be
Mhm.
okay. And serving her, the chamomile and lavender tea, and like there were people who had caring hearts. So she's seeing this doesn't have to be my norm. This isn't
Yeah.
norm. People
Mhm.
don't have to take advantage of me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Was powerful. And I love the little girl who was like, oh, I always wanted to have a sister. Like this poor girl has just run because she was probably about to be raped by this
Right.
guy. And she's like, oh, so my
Yeah.
little boyfriend. And she's like, they're
Mhm.
having girl talk, but
Yeah.
Virginia's not really a part of the
Yeah.
girl talk. She probably would have loved to have been a part of the girl
Oh
talk,
yeah.
especially after her first love.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
But she never really had anybody. It was always the
Mhm.
boys,
Mm-hmm.
you
She
know.
also said, um, wanting, it was translated as wanting is power. So her wanting to, learn how to read, to become more educated. I think she knew that if that happened, that she would be able to, um, continue to grow and even like grow out of her situation, which eventually she did.
Mhm.
Um, and I, I think of women that were just so strong.
Yeah.
And she's
Yeah.
just another example of, this inner strength that you keep despite, um, you know, difficult situations, and in her case, horrible situations. She just
Mhm.
had that once again. It's like she had this like fire burning inside of her,
Mm.
ever since she was little, when she was jumping on the couches.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just hated the concept of the constantly you have the mestizos. I probably don't say
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Indigenous, people. Like you're immediately saying, oh, we have separate categories. Um, and we still do that to this day horribly. Oh, you got Democrats, oh, you got Republicans, oh, you got
Yeah.
blacks versus whites. Like there's just this constant battle, not realizing it's okay for us to be diverse. Like, how many
Mhm.
times do we tell our students, if everybody was the same, wouldn't the world just be so boring?
Yeah. Yeah.
But adults don't even look at it like that. No, they see categories. Oh, you fit here. Oh, you fit here. Oh,
Mhm.
you fit here. And it's like, how do we break this? That is becoming a norm,
Mhm.
is for kids to
Sadly.
automatically see, oh, you're different from me.
Mhm.
Acceptance is not there anymore. And that's why for our SEL lessons this last week, I chose acceptance, because kids, they are struggling so much with learning. Like, ew, I can't believe you brought that for snack. That's
Yeah.
disgusting. Like, where did you
Uh-huh.
even get that? I have a kid who eats seaweed chips every day. It
Yeah.
smells like crap.
Oh yeah.
Um, Flippin' loves them,
Mhm.
and like kids, oh my God, I'm just gonna throw up. And then you're just like, stop, leave the poor kid alone.
Right.
If it stinks, go stand in the corner.
Yes.
Don't
Yeah.
make them feel bad for something they actually enjoy. And first off, have you ever even tried it? Well, no.
Yeah.
So then I started thinking about that book that I told you guys about. I can't remember if it was last time or before, but All Are Welcome Here.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Being that one that was vetted for the county, but then that one school pulled it. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, you pulled it just because you saw in a picture that there is a gay couple. The book was not promoting be gay, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yes.
It's about diversity. So then I started thinking, I don't, my schools never had it. The school I taught at previously never had it. The schools I ever stopped, student taught in never had it. Was a culture night, like let's have everyone from different families bring their traditional foods or bring a poster board to say about their holidays. Like,
Mhm.
we don't do that,
Yeah.
and even if we did do that, can you imagine what the principals would be like? Well, how are we going to vet this? We need to
Mhm.
be looking at this 60 days in advance. We need to have it on a calendar, because we
Mhm.
had kids that wanted to come do their Chinese New Year
Yeah.
Mhm.
presentation
Uh-huh.
that we've done every year.
Yeah.
They were told no. They were told
Yes.
no. And that kills me. That's huge. They're not
Yes.
telling you be Chinese and
Correct.
celebrate. Like, we are teaching not to be accepting.
Correct.
And that's something that I find to be so heartbreaking.
And ironically, with the new, bullying stuff coming down, it's like, how can you, like chapter 8 mentioned, it's like by taking away something's power, you take power away from it. So by, always like not talking about something or always making, these topics taboo and you can't talk about this and you can't mention that or you can't address that, these things, you're giving it power. You're making it to the point where it's something exactly as you said, you are creating, this culture of, oh, it's not acceptable. That's not the norm. That's not something. And it's just so ironic with the anti-bullying thing that I'm like, but do you know how to really get rid of bullying? And it's not just a matter of seeing it and saying stop,
Mhm.
or whatever they want you to do.
They
Yeah.
still follow me when I do this.
Uh-huh.
No, you're not getting it. Don't talk to me.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
oh my gosh, it's killing me. They don't understand. And
No.
you want it to be the same
No.
thing for kindergarten through 5th grade. You're trying to say they're the same maturity wise.
Oh, yeah.
They're
No.
not.
No, absolutely. And they need different,
Like, are these people, have they
things
ever been
and
teachers?
right.
Do
No,
they know little
for
humans?
real.
It's
And
just,
like different communities are different, like teaching in the Title I school, like the things that kids were made fun of were vastly different than, things that might be at Mount Bethel, like it's
Mhm.
so vastly
did you guys pick the
different.
same hand signal?
I think ours is like, stop. We only heard it once, very,
It was good.
very
You know,
briefly in a staff meeting. And I'm just
so
like, it's so ridiculous.
our counselor just came in and she taught a lesson. Now I stepped out I think I stepped out to go to the bathroom actually, maybe. But I know that she said that, like she was saying, if you don't want something, you say, and I think she did the stop,
Huh?
that
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. And
I
I was like,
laughed
okay.
because we're in this meeting.
So
It's the
funny.
whole staff. And we have 2 counselors, and one of the counselors was up there. So we were thinking this is the hand signal. And she goes like this. And if you were ever a fan of Friends growing up,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
that's what Ross
absolutely.
does. And so we were in stitches, but my principal was not. And so she was like, that is not kind. And everyone started laughing. We're like, did you ever watch Friends? And she goes, no, I wasn't allowed to. I wasn't allowed to watch Friends when I was in high school. And
Yeah.
all my dance friends did. And I remember if we were at the dance studio to a certain time, if we had 15 minutes before our parents picked us up and we were sitting with our dance bags, they would let us turn on the TV and it would always be on Friends. And my friends were like, oh, this was the best episode. Or, oh my gosh, tonight's the next one. And like, my parents wouldn't let me watch it. They thought it was too grown up behavior that they didn't want me to have access to. And I remember
Yeah.
my friends making fun of me. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I was clueless.
Yeah.
I was a very naive teenager in many aspects. And I take that as almost a compliment
Yeah.
because I
Sorry.
think that was so
You're right.
helpful.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I felt like I stayed a kid for a good while. Um, but then you think about when I did go off to college and I'd be like, whew, what just happened? And who can
See,
I
I know,
go
and
to
that's
ask
the
this?
hard, yeah, where's the line of where, like you need
Yeah.
to prep, you don't want to traumatize somebody too soon or, or give them information that they are not mentally ready to handle. But at the same time, it's like, where is the line of like doing somebody a disservice by not sharing some things versus,
Exactly.
you got to do it.
I have a fourth grade friend who she's brand new to teaching. She's a baby. She's 23. She's so stinking cute. And she's just, you would never know. I mean, she's come in, she's been an absolute rock star. And the other day we were talking that she didn't watch a video ahead of time. And I walked in the middle of the conversation, but she goes, oh my gosh, there was something that was seen. A lot of kids didn't notice it, but one kid goes, oh no, is that okay? So I need to go to her and ask what actually happened. But I caught the part where she was like, oh my God, I have to call this family right now and apologize because it's a pastor's son. And so I'm like, oh, I now need to know the story. So I'm gonna have to call her and get back to you guys on what happened. But I did find out that whatever did happen, the sweet girl goes up to the office, tells her she's crying. Oh my God, please don't fire me. She's just a mess, And she's like, but this is coming from her. I want to call the parents and explain because it was not an inappropriate video. He took something that was said in there, but no one else noticed it. I need it addressed with him because he's now confused.
Yeah.
So I would love to know what it was, but I was so proud of her as a brand new teacher. That could have just destroyed her. Like, never again.
Yes.
And she just handled that with such maturity. Wow. The parents were so kind. Oh, I appreciate you so much. Yes, we will talk to him. Please don't be so hard on yourself. But think about how many parents would have been complete jerks. Right? I'm like, girl, you got so lucky. Right. Ooh, Nelly.
I know.
I mean, I still feel like there's so many of us this year. Like, how do we protect ourselves? These are intense topics, but I don't think all of them should be forgotten.
No.
So how are they going to be addressed? Does the county come up with so many books in certain genres for certain age groups for the what ifs, where we don't get slapped?
Right.
Do the council get more involved? I think they should,
I would love to see a standard involved in something about like, what, having effective discourse, and I don't think that that's in there, but even if like the state or the county could say, hey, in kindergarten, you can debate, I don't know, what's something of like age appropriate topics where it's like, hey, you should be having a debate in your fifth grade classroom about, it is a fifth grade standard, like should Truman have dropped the atomic bomb, and going into the reasons, but something, like that, they're ready for that in fifth grade, like they've learned enough. They can, talk through some of those things. But I would love to see curriculum, in general, and state standards change to address controversial topics. All right, counties, your job at the county level is to provide fourth grade a list, fifth grade a list, all the way through 12th grade, where at that point, as 18-year-olds, they should be talking about things like,
absolutely,
abortion rights, unwanted pregnancy, things like that, because that's real world. They're 18 years old.
Well, you think about, I don't know if you guys have read the book, The Giver.
Yeah.
The best books I have ever read.
Love The Giver.
Quick read. It's by Lois Lowry. She writes Number of the Stars for World War II, which is another great read. But in The Giver, there's a ton of controversial topics and really teaches you the concept of black and white and that whole gray area. And if how the book ends, you got to read it, Tina. It's so good. I'm not a fast reader. I read that very quickly. The ending of the book is so powerful because so many people think when I read it in college, half the class felt like the book ended one way and the other half completely disagreed. But it talks about, euthanization. And at a certain age, you're just too old. You're not valuable anymore. We're going to kill you, some very controversial topics. And I remember the girl that's like my little sister read it in 10th grade and she was just so darn confused. And it was so over her head, but it's stuff that the teacher didn't talk enough about history and helping them understand, like, no, these things have happened in different times of history, and the whys to why they had happened, or the manipulation that was created to help people think, oh no, this is okay to do.
Yeah.
Is just fascinating. So I think the conversation needs to be had with the state or the counties or the school system in some form, but it doesn't need to just be leaders. It needs to be teachers that I think, like a teacher committee, that's a part of creating new standards to help with the different age groups to have appropriate, I agree. It needs to be a part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
How do we make that happen?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't listen to teachers,
Yeah. Right.
Clearly.
I
Yeah,
wish.
it's sad.
do the
It
best
really
we
is
can.
sad because they make these decisions, and, they tell you something, but, it's so vague. Just like a lot of the standards that have changed, or, the report card rubric, it's just, they put stuff out there and they just push it so quickly, and none of it is done well.
No.
None of it is done well. None of it is teacher friendly. And
you might interpret it completely different from how I would interpret it, and it's the same age group. Too much gray. And I do like gray. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I thought this was another fantastic.
Gosh, yes.
Yeah. It's a great read.
So
Yep.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed it like I did, but I
Yes.
appreciate you guys. I think that was awesome conversation.
Mhm.
I also think Dr. O does a phenomenal job making sure the book choices correlate perfectly with the multicultural, textbook.
That's what I said in the for the midterm. I mentioned that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They do.
Fantastic.
Now, so she chooses the books. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
I would think
I think
so.
so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, she's
I'm like,
spot
I
on.
would love to teach a
Yeah.
class like this.
She's spot on.
Oh yeah, she's done a
100%.
fantastic job for
Yeah.
sure. Well, I'm going to stop recording because it was amazing.
Mhm.
Yes.
You guys are great. Really, really easy to talk to.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, I
We need to get
agree.
together
I
for
enjoy.
coffee.